Tuttles, you just called us. What are you doing?
I got this new Google AI content creator assist. It's been helping me with my content lately. And I guess it just called you guys on Discord, and now I have a script and it says, "Welcome back to the bench, powered by Wowhead."
Oh, it's not even the right date, but I'll go with it.
Yeah, so welcome to our Patreon exclusive content. And this week, we're going to be talking about Blizzard feedback single button assisted highlight mode in patch 11.1.7. What is this, Squishy?
Well, it's a one button rotation and it has freaked out the entire internet. Basically, you can do your entire rotation with pressing one button. At a penalty of a slight GCD penalty. And it's coming in patch 11.1.7.
Okay.
Man, there was the meme of in emergency break glass, dinars, and then there was the other one, and now there's the in emergency need to distract the community, release the most ridiculous sounding news you've ever heard. And their news is they're basically adding Hikili, which is like a rotation helper, and putting in a literal one button rotation where it does a suggested rotation at a delay in game.
Did either of you guys play with this?
I did not at that time.
So I've actually done a little bit of experimenting. So first of all, I went on PTR and I opened it up. Turns out that walking up to target dummies and then hitting one button over and over again and not having details or anything and just sitting there isn't as fun as it maybe sounds. So then I looked up what's currently available in terms of one button rotation helpers, and I decided that I was going to create a one button Ret Paladin, and I just downloaded a one button Ret Paladin button with some add-on called like GSC, I think. It's like an advanced macro helper. And I just went into keys and I just pressed my one button throughout the entire key. And it was an interesting experience.
How did it go?
So I did a couple different keys. I actually did one key where I was 10 item levels below a mage in our party, and I did the same amount of damage as them. And I like this is me only pressing one button. Like, okay, I had like blinding light bound to do the orb affix or whatever, and I like had my defense buttons. But like it was literally, I can't even tell you the name of any of my abilities or what any of them did. Like, I didn't read a single talent. I didn't read a single ability. I've never been Ret Paladin in my life. I just downloaded one button. I didn't read what it does, and I just walked around and pressed it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was like not very, in my opinion, it was passable damage. Like, it was like, not good, but, like it was, you could easily do a 10 with it. Because considering I was 640 item level, so like, I would say like, a more casual player isn't doing 10s right now at 640. Like, they're doing it like, what, 650, 655, 660.
660.
By that time, you're easily doing 1.5 to 2 million overall, which is plenty for a plus 10.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, by the way, there are two different things that they're adding in 11.1.7. One is the one button rotation, and the other one is just a traditional rotation helper where it lights up the button that it thinks you should play or you should press next. That one has no penalty attached to it, and SimC is still figuring out the rotations, but a lot of them look pretty good.
Oh, that's good.
I've seen a couple sims. They're like 90% throughput.
I've seen worse. I've definitely seen worse.
And they're like really like they're obviously basic, but like a lot of you don't need to optimize crazy to 100% of the majority of content. So like 90% is more than enough, and I think it's good for the game, honestly.
So Growl sent me this video from One Azeroth TV and goes, "You need to watch this on stream." I think this was probably 4 or 5 days ago. And
it was right after last pod, I think.
Yeah.
So like on reset day.
So the story of the video was basically there is this guy in a group, and it's hard to even explain the video without like you guys watching it. But basically he's in Vengeance spec, but he doesn't know that he's signing up to tank. He's like brand new to the game, has only been playing for 3 months. I pulled up his armory on his character because I was trying to figure out what was going on. He'd only been playing for 3 months, and he basically just like didn't know what was going on in the game, is the TLDR. And I remember watching that video on stream, and I kind of just had the thought, I was like, man, Blizzard does not do a good job of accommodating the new player experience to this game, especially telling you things like you're in Vengeance, you're actually in Tank, and like telling you what your rotation is or like what buttons you should be pressing. He would like not have threat on packs because he wasn't pressing buttons and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, I could definitely see this happening. Like, if I kind of think of it, whenever I think of casual players, sometimes it's like, what if my stepdad started playing World of Warcraft today? How would he play the game? And it's like, I could definitely see my stepdad doing something like what happened in that video. I'm like, okay, I could definitely see this happening. And
well, the big thing is that the like beginner sort of queues, like for instance, normal heroic dungeons, follower dungeons, LFR, when you queue those, you pick what role you get, right? And then when you get your match, it puts you in the instance, and then it also switches you to that role.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do that in LFG, right? It just puts you in the group. And so, he's signing up to groups as DPS, but why he's Vengeance in the open world, we don't know. And then he just, the group is like, okay, this guy wants a tank. And he basically did a dungeon. They depleted it. They did another dungeon. And then like 3 packs in, the guy says, who's our tank? Like literally the guy who's in Vengeance, who's tanking, types in the chat, who is our tank? And then everyone is like, you, like, what the fuck? But anyway, it was like a very, very funny vid, but it's like, it's something where, so like people in my chat point out like, oh, you're elitist or whatever for like laughing at these people. But no, I think it's actually the opposite. Like, I think as someone who not only has a very vested interest in the game because I do this for a living, but also like I love this game and I want other people to love it, and I care about the new player experience, and I want people getting into the game to fall in love with the game in the same sort of way that I did, right? And it's like, it's different, as the game changes and that pathway changes, it's like, you sort of wonder like, would I have fallen in love with this game if when I started off, some guy was like, okay, here you go. Here's your 1 button macro, play this and do your quests or whatever.
So this is all kind of circling back to this WOWCast that was released with somehow Max and Dratno. So I don't really know what's going on over there. What about us? But anyways, so they had a WOWCast where they announced, like Squishy said, I would describe it as in-game Hikili and the 1 button assist. I guess start talking about the 1 button Hikili. Is there anything wrong with this? I feel like this is honestly like the best possible approach for brand new players who are trying to like learn the game, right?
Yes. So like we said earlier, there is a punishment, not really a punishment. There is a detriment to using it for people who are familiar with the game, which is that the GCD is increased. It's 20% of your GCD. 0.3 seconds
button.
if you have like no haste.
That's the one
button only.
Yeah.
Oh, are you talking about
I'm talking about the Hikili Lite thing.
Oh, the Hikili? Oh no, I think that's great.
Okay.
I mean, you got to start somewhere, and it telling you what to press is good.
So one thing is that it already very much exists, right? Like, this is not something new that Blizzard is inventing. This is something that already exists that they're putting into the game. So it's kind of hard to say that it's very bad or very good, right? Because it's, they're not, it's already exists. One thing I'll say is that I hear the idea of people learning it or using it to learn a class or learn the game. I don't know if I totally buy that. I think that, this is like maybe not the best example, but in poker, there's been a lot of tools that come out that are like AI or like neural networking or whatever. And the problem is, like, this, this isn't teaching you anything, right? All it's doing is lighting up a button. So every time you're in combat, it just lights this up and lights this up and lights this up. And the question is just, are you actually like, yeah, I guess you get a general idea of like, okay, Arcane Mage presses Barrage and Arcane Blast and Arcane Missiles. Like, kind of what buttons to press. But how, like, you're not actually learning why you're pressing the buttons, right? You're just sort of like, learning what buttons to press. Like, I don't really buy the idea that you're using it to learn. I think you're using it because you want good performance, and you do, like, until you get, whether or not you learn later is beside the point. I think it's just there to get better performance while you don't know what to do. But I don't actually, I mean, I would be interested to see, like, if you take somebody and you use the rotation helper for a week straight and then you just hide it again and take it off, how, like, I guess, what do you got? Like, do you guys think you'll learn? You know, like, just imagine what you're, like, the main class that you play, if it's just like all it does is it lights up the button to press and all you're doing is pressing what's lighting up. After a week of doing that, do you know anything more about the class than you did when you started?
I think it depends. Like, if I downloaded it on Ellie Shaman, okay, so here's the thing. So whenever I did my 0 to hero, if say I used this whenever I first started my Ellie Shaman, instead of watching a guide, I actually don't think I would have learned anything. I would have just like have pressed the buttons as they lit up, and honestly probably pressed them slow because I'm trying to. Because
you have to react to it.
Because you have to react to it. Yeah, it's kind of like weird. So I would end up pressing it slow and not queuing up abilities as fast as I reasonably could. But if I activated it after I watched a guide and really was trying to digest why you're pressing the buttons you're pressing, and still have some of these other things on my UI, like a maelstrom bar and tracking my buffs and debuffs and tracking my dots and stuff like that, and try to use that in conjunction with like watching a guide and trying to learn, I think it actually could be helpful. Because something that I was like bad about doing, especially really early on as Ellie Shaman, is I wasn't lava bursting enough. Like on single target, I was just not pressing lava burst nearly as much as I needed to. And like I knew that. Like I read a guide, I understood that I needed to press lava burst enough, but I just wasn't. And I think if it was like lighting up the lava burst, it would have helped me. And it's like the same thing whenever I was playing Havoc Demon Hunter. When I was playing Havoc Demon, I just was not blade dancing enough. And I do think that like for some people, just being like reinforcing, you need to be pressing blade dance right now. It is off cooldown. It should be the first global, the number one global priority here is blade dance. Like that would probably help me a little bit.
I think there's some benefit directly, but also it couldn't. Like adding this to me doesn't hurt, because I believe this is true. I'm not 100% on it, but I'm pretty sure the one button and the non-one button have the same priority. So like if they were gonna add the one button anyways, this is just a free separate addition using the same priority, just not on a single button, which I think if it helps one or a couple people, that's better than none, considering it's basically free in my mind.
Well, all right, this might be a Growl Goes Down in Flames episode. I'm warning everybody here. Okay, I'm warning everybody here right away. This might be a Growl Goes Down in Flame episode. But so I mean, to say it helps people, like define help people. Like, okay, let's say I'm playing Counter-Strike and I'm new to Counter-Strike and I suck at aiming, and they put in auto aim in the game for me. Does that help me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it helps me. It doesn't, it doesn't hurt anyone else. If you don't want to use auto aim, don't use it.
Well, I don't think that this is. What are you referring? Are you referring to the one button rotation? Because I think that I feel differently about the two things. Are you referring to the Heat Killian game? Or are you referring to the one button rotation?
Well, I just mean the argument that it doesn't hurt anything.
I think the one button rotation actively helps players who don't want to read a guide, because I think the subset of players who reads guides are already a very very hardcore subset of players.
Let's tackle them one at a time, I guess.
Yeah.
Just start with the Hikili. I mean, the main issue with me having an issue with it is that it already exists, right? Like you can just download an add-on and do it. And I mean, the more I think about it, the more I think that it's actively bad for the game that it just pops. I mean, to me, this is like almost no different from like the solver weak auras. Like, puts up a giant thing. Okay, stand over here, and it coordinates your group, right? Like. Because the way I see it is, it's not actually teaching you anything. Like it's just there because you want to perform better without having to like look at a guide or something. And I would argue that I don't even think that's an unreasonable thing, right? Because WoW is so complicated, right? Like I agree. Like my point is that I agree that there's a problem here, that classes are way too complicated. Like synergies between abilities, there's way too many, and you have to look at way too many buffs and all this stuff, right? But my issue is like, okay, well, let's, we're creating a massive band-aid here for some, like, this doesn't really fix the problem of the classes being way too complicated and convoluted. Like, they've addressed that, okay, classes are way too ridiculous that you need to sit here and study for hours and use a Wowhead guide and, like, compare shit and record your gameplay. Like, think about how good you feel you are at Elite Shaman right now. Like, you're probably like, yeah, I'm okay. Like, I feel like I'm
fucking terrible.
Right? You're awful. And how many hours? How many hours did you put into it? Like, how many hours should it take for someone who's literally a professional fucking WoW player to be able to play a class?
I'm at 60.
You're a ranged DPS player. You're a professional WoW player, and you've put in probably 100 hours
60.
on
I'm at 60.
Shaman.
I'm at 60.
And you're at 60, and you suck at it.
Yeah.
Like, do you not sit there and think, wow, that might be a problem? Like, you know, a professional WoW player spent 60 hours and they suck at a class. Like, on one hand, I don't think that it's bad in some situations, right? Like, I think, number one, there should be a lot to master. And number two, like, having some classes be very complicated, I think is very healthy for the game. There's nothing wrong with either of those things. But just the average, right? The average class is way too complicated. And the average difference between, like, you know, how much damage you can do and how much damage you realistically do if you suck is just way too high. And I think that, like, putting in Hakili and putting in a one-button rotation is just such a massive band-aid compared to let's look at these classes and try and make like some. I don't like using the word simplification because, like, you know, again, I don't want to scare people into thinking that I want to dumb down the game. Like, I like that there is difficulty in the game, but I think that, like, you know, how do you not look at a professional WoW player who plays ranged DPS for a living, spending 60 hours on Ellie Shaman and then being like, yeah, I suck. Like, that's got to be intimidating, right? For somebody who's like, if you're just getting into Ellie Shaman, and then, you know, someone probably told you that that's easy. You know, someone probably, Ellie Shaman's not that hard. That's easy. You just press Chain Lightning.
I do think all of the specs in the game are roughly the same difficulty in terms of rotation. I do think the cap on, like, how much damage you can do is really high in World of Warcraft, just generally speaking.
For me, I there's a part that I definitely agree with. Like, I think we all agree that things are pretty complicated, and adding an additional, you know, in-game version to supplement a beginner player is really useful. I will admit that I don't know how much, you know, things lighting up and playing whack-a-mole is actually going to help someone teach the rotation. But also, like, it would also be more useful, I think, if people could read their priority in game. You know, like, for example, you know, really simple example, Assassination Rogue. Keep your dots up, keep your dots up, and then use Envenom as your finisher, and then use Mutilate as your, you know, at a very baseline level, that could be useful to actually read in game.
I agree.
Because we don't need to go into the super in depth, like, if you have overcharged combo point, make sure you hit, no, just keep the very basic rotation in game. That I think is very useful, and something that I think, like, having a written, you know, you swap to Assassination, you read a quick thing that's just like, here's what you do. It is a partial dot, partial this. Here's the abilities that you want, your most important abilities. This is your cooldown. I think that could go really hard. And I think that's something that's still kind of missing there.
And to me, the best analogy that I give it to is like hey, don't you guys have phones? Like, remember when they came out with Diablo Immortal? And it's like, you know, okay, it's fine that they're doing Diablo Immortal, you know, no one's like mad about it, but it's all the Diablo fans that are like, we love this. This is some huge announcement and acknowledgement that we need more content, and then this is what you give us. Like, I think, you know, exactly what you said about, you know, you took basically 5 seconds to think about what they could have done better, and it's like, so for instance, Arcane Mage. A big thing about Arcane Mage, you have a button called Barrage. It does a bunch of damage, but you lose all your charge. And so the whole point is you want to build up to max charge, and then you only want to press Barrage when you can get your charge back quickly. And so the whole name of the game is just paying attention to your procs, what abilities do you have, knowing when you can press Barrage and then build your charge back up. And so literally all it takes is some little in-game scenario that could probably take an intern. Like, I'm sure some guy could make a little flash game for this in, like, you know, less than a day and be like, you know, a barrage helper. And it just, you sit there and it gives you random procs, and do you barrage or do you not barrage? And it could be this little game that you walk into the mage, you know, the mage tower or whatever PvE place, and you do it and you play the game and it teaches you when to use barrage. And it would literally make you so fucking good. And then there could be another game where it's like, okay, here's your surge window or your combust window or whatever. Like, here's 15 seconds. Can you press every single global perfectly? And then it gives you a score of 0 out of 100 of how efficient you are, right? Like, these are things that, number one, dude, people would have so much more fun with that. Like, imagine you're some noob, right? And you're like, you don't know how to play Arcane Mage, but you go to the fucking Mage Tower in the lab and you like, oh, I got a 99, I got a 99 on my combust. And then Twix comes in the chat. Well, actually, Growl, I got a 99.4 combust. I was up all night doing the combust. You know, like this is how it should, like, teach us the game. This doesn't teach us the game, putting these buttons in. And before, I know people have already written angry comments on me and left by now, but I'm going to say this to just in case. There's a lot of discussion about accessibility. People who physically can't play or is a struggle to play or to press buttons who don't have the capabilities. This is not what I'm talking about. I have no problem with trying to figure out ways and be novel and allowing more people to integrate and play more of World of Warcraft. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about this subset of people. I'm talking about specifically just average, person with no restrictions or little restrictions to their mobility and their movement.
Yeah.
And so that's been a very common defense of like, oh, there's so-and-so person and they have this, they're maybe quadriplegic or maybe they could have this or maybe they, whatever. And it's like, dude, I can't imagine what it would be like to wake up tomorrow and not be able to play my favorite game. That would fucking suck. All the sympathy goes out to these people, and I do want to accommodate them. But at the same time, like, you do want to keep the game as it is, right? Like, you don't want to make weird changes to the game. And it's not like this, there's a reason that they brought Max and Dratnos onto this talk, because this is not only targeted towards quote unquote, well, I mean, accessibility can be a wide term, but this is not only targeted to people that physically cannot press the buttons. Like, this is a talk about add-ons. This is a talk about weak auras, about guides, about advanced play, mythic rating. He's talking specifically about competitive play. Like, bro, I have no problem. If someone wants to use a one button, do giga damage, thing to solo quest and farm mogs and, do follower dungeons, who cares about that? Like, I'm all for that. That's cool.
I think the one button stuff for people who, like you said, have these disabilities that they can't play the game at a regular capacity, I think that's actually perfect for them. And honestly, as well, giving it like the GCD penalty, I think is like the right level of make sure that somebody doesn't get, I would say, accustomed to using this who doesn't need it. Right, but I think there's a decent amount of people who don't really care about like getting good at the game. They just want to play as well, and I think also the one button thing can be good for them. But I don't think it teaches you how to play. I generally don't think it teaches you how to play. I think it's supplemental on being able to play the game, but it doesn't like teach you how to play in the right ways. In my opinion.
The issue that I have is the saying, okay. Well, there's two different things to talk about, right? Number one is when you talk about the GCD restriction or whatever.
Yeah.
There is a line that they can draw where they can perfectly balance this, right? Where, for people with certain restrictions or just very, very beginners, it does something, but still is like nowhere near anybody even trying to put an effort to a rotation. But that's assuming that they hit that, right? Like, they have to hit that mark perfectly. Very likely there's going to be tons of players who get outperformed by this one button. I believe personally.
I mean, this is a 30%. This is a 30% damage down. Like, it's not like a small thing.
Do you know how many times I've done a key with
20% of your globals and then it's the wrong APL? So.
Do you know how many times I've done a key and have somebody in the key do 50% more damage than another person?
Yeah.
If I bring Evade in, and let's talk about a 10 or a 12. I'm not even talking about a 2. I'm talking about a 12, right? If I bring Evade into a 12 or like a 10, or I bring Dorky's Boomkin, they're going to, I mean, they will take a 30% hit and still beat you. Like, if you're taking 30% off of Evade's rotation or Dorky's rotation or Greg's Enhanced Shaman, I mean, dude, Greg's Enhanced Shaman was like doubling people's damage sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Like, my point is that while it's true that they could hit that mark, I don't like, it's gonna help some people, right? Like, there's very clearly some percentage of the player base that they're going to wake up and they're going to hit a target dummy and then realize that if they turn on the one button rotation mode and just mash one button, their DPS is gonna go up. Right? Like, whether or not that's 5% of the population, whether it's 25%. And to be honest, the scary part is the more of a percentage it is, the more it helps people, right? if it only helps 2% of players, then it's like kind of a waste of fucking time, right? But if it's actually helping 25% of people perform better, well, that's an effective system. But also now 25% of the people in the game are, feeling like they should use a rotation helper. Like, why wouldn't you? You're fucking trolling, right?
So I think it's just like important to go back. I posted the clarification from Blizzard as to what the thing actually does. If you want to pull that up, because Blizzard clarified what this is supposed to do. So the single button assistant and the assisted highlight basically just adjust your abilities and adjust that to changing talents. And it can swap between single target and AoE damage, based on how many enemies you're near. But the things that it don't do is actually pretty long. Obviously, it can't move your character or use mobility, which might be an issue if you're a caster. It can't change targets for you. And it doesn't use offensive cooldowns, which is probably fine. Doesn't use utility or interrupts.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you have to choose when to use your cooldowns. It doesn't interrupt or use utility or CC, makes sense. It can't heal or use defensives, makes sense. And it can't use trinkets, potions, other similar things. Like, to me, all of that makes sense, but it's just important to know what this thing actually does, which is just help with a single target damage rotation.
That's correct. Your damage rotation.
Yeah, your damage rotation.
Correct. Yeah.
Like, I don't think this thing will be able to, for example, deal with Destruction Warlock very well because it doesn't know how or when to put up Havoc. I'm pretty sure that's not even in the list of things that it can do.
Oh yeah.
So like,
there's going to be, this is the crazy part, right? Is there's going to be, in my opinion, a huge delta between all the different specs, right? Like classes that have very fluent cooldowns of like, you just sort of press it and you do big damn and you just do your same thing. Those classes are probably going to be way more effective. And classes that can move while they're doing their whole rotation, like a Ret Paladin, for example, I feel like are going to be way crazier than a class like, a caster or whatever, or like a mage that might have a very specific sequence that they need to press during their cooldowns. But that sort of goes in more in my favor in the fact that it's very unlikely that they're going to be able, to balance this to a good level, right? Like imagine a BM hunter. Like shouldn't a BM hunter, if your auto rotation freaking own? Like if you're just like, if you can just run around and do whatever you want and you just mash one button, like it should freaking own, right?
I mean, it's not that many buttons anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Overall though, I think there is still something to learn from those who will use it, right? Like, like Tettle said, Blade Dance comes up. It always tells me to press Blade Dance next. Like, I noticed that kind of thing. It's also a really noticeable spell. Like, there are things that you're going to subconsciously notice when you use this. So I think there is some benefit to using it. But also, these, I think this is targeting people that are just doing open world content or want to do delves or collections, that just really want to watch Netflix on one monitor and spam one button while doing something on WoW.
Is the game going to console by chance? This feels
I've been hearing that a lot.
This feels like a move to the game going to console. No.
All right, so I'm gonna read you this quote, by the way, because everyone keeps saying that as well. This is the quote that I keep throwing at everybody. This is from Ian. This is him talking about both systems at the very beginning. This reflects us hearing people in the community telling us that they feel the need to seek out third-party resources such as Sakili or other guides in baseline competitive content. Quote that he used. So I believe that it's specifically meant for people who want to enter the raid or want to enter dungeons and not just for solo content.
I think the one button stuff is separate from the Hikili thing. I think the Hikili thing, yeah, I mean, it's more effective to have this Hikili light thing than to try to have a guide on your second monitor written by some professional World of Warcraft player and try to digest like what you're actually supposed to do with your rotation. I mean, you guys, you guys have done raid bosses before, right? Like you've done Sprocketmonger Lock and Stock, and you got this fucking article on your left monitor, and you're like
9-part raid plan and all these icons.
You're like try to like squint at it to figure out like, oh shit, am I on 5 or 6? And then you drop the drills in the middle of the room, and you're like, oh no, this is definitely the wrong spot. Yep. And you're just like, oh no, like. It's the same thing with like having a guide on your second monitor. It's not really effective.
I mean, overall though, the one thing that I think has been talked about that I kind of agree with is the GCD. They're like the penalty for the one button I think is good, but I don't think it should be a GCD. think it should be just a flat nerf to.
It makes haste really bad too.
It makes things feel weird, which maybe isn't a bad thing in hindsight. Like maybe they went for GCD because when you're doing a one button, you don't want to like just be doing this the entire time. Like especially if you're playing a fast class, you need to press the GCD every 1 second. Maybe the goal is to actually extend the GCD to make the game play a little slower, like Final Fantasy.
Right.
But if
that's sort of my impression of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if that's the case, great. If that's not the case, I do think as a learning tool, it's a little weird because you're not actually getting a quote true rotation. Everything's going to be slower. And then the second you turn that off and try for real, you're going to be relearning a lot of it, right? Like I can fit X number of casts between my fire breath or something.
Yeah.
And now I'm fitting like more because I don't have a GCD penalty. So like there's a little bit of oddness there.
Do you think the one button thing is an effective way of teaching people the game?
It's better than nothing.
I think it's virtually nothing. I think that both the one button thing and the Healy are virtually nothing in terms of like what you said. Here's the key part. What you said, Tuttles, right? You acknowledge that there's a way that you can use Healy and like have that be an assistant to you or learning the game, right?
Yeah.
However, that involves looking up a guide, looking up a rotation, knowing all the things, right? All the other things that you were already doing, and then just putting Healy on top of that, right? So, I mean, like, for them to make the argument that we're trying to add this into the game to simplify things, this does not replace anything. You still need to bring up the Wowhead guide and the rotation, and then the priority list, and then when to use your cooldowns, and then you just put Healy on top of that. And Healy alone, or one button rotation alone, I would argue that I just don't think, I mean, I would be interested, but, like, I think that I just don't expect it. Like, I played Ret Paladin, right? Like, I did a one button rotation on Ret Paladin, and I don't know what any of my buttons did. I like how if you go in and you're pressing one button over and over and over again, and it's just doing random things. How are you even gonna know what? Like, I couldn't even tell you what any of the buttons are named. I have no idea what priority it uses.
Templar's Verdict, Divine Storm, Judgment.
I think people would type like, executioner's sentence on the blob's Keck W, and like I don't know what they're saying. Like I don't know what my guy's doing. I'm just running around pressing one button. Like I learned virtually nothing. I learned like virtually nothing when it comes to the one button. I don't know. Like I see that if you're a noob, the difference between you and somebody who's like spends a bunch of time studying and using add-ons is insanely big.
Do you think the skill ceiling's too high?
Yes, but so there's two different layers to the skill ceiling, right? There's the balance of how much you're gaining, and then there's also the levels of complexity, right?
Okay.
Like let's say there's in order to go from a total noob to a total expert, you have to like spend 1,000 hours mastering it, right? I think that time it's too long, but again, like certain classes can take a long time to master. But then there's also like the individual things that like, okay, if you're doing this thing, you're getting way more damage. And I think like, basically I made this tweet that was something along the lines of like, they're not reinventing anything by making a one button macro because button mashing already exists, right? Like let's say you're playing somebody who's a total noob who's the first time playing the game and they're on a mage. It's like, okay, just press fireball. Like just here's fireball, put it on your one key and just mash fireball over and over, right? And then like that's what you do, right? You just mash a button over and over again. Well, the problem is that the difference between mashing one button over and over again and doing your rotation is so insane because of all these like stacking multipliers and talents and effects and procs and like, maybe we just need to go back to pressing one button over and over again is like kind of good, right? Like if you're just mashing fireball, it's not so bad rather than like trying to make a one button rotation that's cycling through all the like I don't know, it just seems so like it's almost like an April Fool's joke that like we realize the rotations are too complicated, so we're making it so you press one button and it does your whole rotation. It's like, why don't you just make better buttons? Like why can't I just press one button and it's a good button? Why do all 19 of my buttons have to suck and I have to sequence them like a fucking Mortal Kombat fatality just to do my opener in every single pack? Like,
I actually don't think that the rotations are too complicated. This might be a hot take, but I actually don't think the rotations are too complicated. I do think the gameplay differences between players is most of where the skill ceiling is. More often than not, it's not like a difference in knowing your rotation. Like, oh, okay, the Moonkin rotation can really be condensed down to maintain your dots, make sure you're always in eclipse, cast your builders on your single target builder on single target,
spender.
and yeah, cast your builder and your spender. It's really not that complicated, and it's probably like 5 buttons to play Moonkin. It's like 6 buttons to play Ellie Shaman. It's not really that complicated. It's more about, in my opinion, how you're moving your character in 3D spaces and min-maxing the opportunities you have to be able to do a lot of damage. And I think that those are kind of the two things. And a lot of bad players, they just miss globals. And like whenever I'm learning Ellie Shaman, I keep doing this thing where sometimes I'll like be stuck at like 85 Maelstrom, think I'm at 90, start to try to cast Ellie Blast, and I'm not casting shit. I'm literally just sitting there.
Yeah, you're just standing there, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're just standing there. And that's a very common thing that happens. But that's not because the rotation is hard. That's because I suck. Like there's not really
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but this is another reason why I think the 1-button rotation is just going to be such an improvement over so many people, right? Like you look at the amount of time, like one of the best advice that you can give to a new player is always be casting, right? And you look at the VOD of anybody who's not an experienced player and they have lots of downtime, right? And probably rightfully so, because they're fucking thinking, right? Because there's things to think about and they're playing an RPG. And in theory, it shouldn't be so bad to have this downtime, but you know, when you have a 1-button rotation, you know, maybe your 0.2 second GCD or whatever delay isn't even going to be that long compared to what the average person has to think about in their rotation. And another thing too is like, to sort of echo a little bit what Tettle's saying, is I don't think the complexity is necessarily too much, but maybe the punishment's too high. Like for example, you know, when you make a small mistake in your rotation, you can do things that like totally butcher all of your damage for the next minute, right? Like, for example, Arcane Mage is like stacking up your Arcane Surge with your Evocate, with your Touch, with 4 charges, and it's like, well, I fat fingered my Arcane Surge, and I like now all my like I literally just do 0 damage for the next 1 minute because I'm a complete idiot, right? And everyone's typing Kek W, and it's like, you know, I'm not that bad to the point where I deserve to do half of the damage I did for the next minute because I messed this one button up. But in reality, there are a lot of things in WoW that are like giga punishing that maybe shouldn't be, right? And not all classes are like that. Like I was listening to some talks about current Ret Paladin versus old Frost DK. How sort of like the new Ret Paladin is kind of like a breath build in a way where you're trying to like keep spending and keeping your cooldowns rolling. However, Wings is a 1-minute CD or whatever, and also it's like a lot less punishing if it falls compared to Frost DK, where if your breath falls after 20 seconds, you're in pain. Like you're just like, I just ruined all my damage for the whole dungeon. And so like, you know, for certain classes very rarely can have like really punishing all or nothing sort of things, and that can be their archetype. But I feel like there's so many of those across so many classes. Like one example I think was Venthyr Boomkin too. Like that was one where that was like a very special niche of like, even if you played Boomkin, you didn't even have to play Venthyr, right? You could have played something else, but this is one specific build of one specific class. And fuck it, if that's what they want, if they want to do some Giga Omega super damage, if they do their 30 button fatality combo perfectly, that's fine. You know, I think that sort of gameplay is fine, but it shouldn't be like so many different classes when you mess up your cooldowns or press one button wrong or do this, you're just like, your damage is omega scuffed and you lose like 10% or 15% of your damage. Because that's where the 1-button rotation thing is going to own you, right? Is if you're just pressing it over and over and over again, you're not missing globals. It's not, you know, messing up the sequencing very much. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but
it doesn't press your cooldowns.
Yeah.
Well, again, so I was mentioning this a little bit when you got up for a second, but I think there'll be a huge difference between certain classes, right? Like for example, I'm sure there will be some classes where when you pop your cooldowns, it requires or really wants you to do a very specific sequence and order of buttons, and it just won't do it properly, and you'll just never do good damage on that class. With a 1-button, you'll never do a good damage with that class unless you somehow change the build. And I'm thinking something like an Arcane Mage, for example, right? If it doesn't do the surge surge combo perfectly global for global. If it doesn't, if you don't know how to press surge and then cue your touch and stuff after it, then it's
Yeah.
going to not do damage. You're never going to do good damage. But there's going to be other classes that, you basically, or like builds, for example, right? This is, I think, is going to be very common, is people are going to start developing one button builds where this is only 5%, 6% less damage than the normal build, but oh man, the rotation does this perfectly. And now you're sitting there doing, 20% less damage than the top, person or whatever, but that's still really good. Like, so I guess a question to you guys too then is, so let's say you're doing the one button single target rotation and on like, whatever class, any class, and what should your parse be then? In terms of, let's say you go into a normal or heroic or mythic, let's just say the fifth boss of the raid, a pure single target. What should you parse in terms of today's standards?
What is our metric here? Normal, heroic, mythic?
Whatever you think. Whatever you think. I'm talking about specifically the fifth boss of a raid in any like whatever difficulty you think.
Well,
because like mythic, right? Mythic would be very, very hard to describe, I think, because like there's a wide range of players that play mythic. But like, okay, what about heroic? What about like
it's a
any
wide
example?
Range of people who play heroic and normal.
Well, any example of what you guys think would be fair, where you guys would be like, okay, Blizzard hit the line here, and this is fine. Like this doesn't. What I guess like what do you envision for that? Let's use Ret Paladin. Okay, well, I'll just be specific, and then you can change the variables if you want. Let's say I'm a Ret Paladin, and I'm going into Sprocket Monger Lock and Stock on Heroic, and I'm doing my one button rotation, and all I do is just stand in range of the boss and mash it, and I never die. Okay, what should my parse be?
30 percentile?
So, let me clarify here. Like, what percentile from the rotation only? Like, or like how bad is it compared to like if I was actually playing?
No, like literally, what would your parse be? Like, you walked into a pug today. Let's say you had the beta version
I had
of
the
it.
thing.
You had it, and you stayed in melee. You stayed in. All you did is stay in melee and live, right? And otherwise, you're just mashing the button.
I think it's a weird answer, but
it's hard, right?
What do I think? What do I think it should be, or what do I think it is?
Either.
What I think it is probably about 75%.
That's what I was thinking too.
What I think
right.
What I think it should be is realistically the rotation's probably it can be equal for all I give a crap about. But the places where people are going to lose damage here is bad cooldown management,
yes,
bad movement management, and staying alive. And honestly, if they can focus on the increasing complexity of mechanics and raids, if this helps them with that, then I don't see a problem if they can do 100%. If there is no penalty on this. Like, there should be a penalty on this, to be clear. But proving
that's a healer take. That's a very I think that's a cool take to have. That basically you're saying that like a lot of the games should be doing the mechanics of the bosses, staying alive, and positioning yourself, and you don't even really value pressing all your buttons in the right order that much, as long as you're not like being a complete moron. Like if you're not losing a cooldown and you're doing all the mechanics of the fight, you should be able to do 80% damage, even just mashing the number one over and over again for the whole fight.
If you do like a really basic builder, like take Red Paladin, you build, you spend, you build, you spend, you press wings, you build, you spend, you build, you spend, you build.
Yeah, exactly.
90%.
Yeah,
I actually think that's what this is, because I think a simple rotation like these APLs are, like action logs, for those who don't use SimC, are very basic. No special conditions for cooldowns, and they are very, very basic based on number of targets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't contribute to the Moonkin one. I do some of the Moonkin theory crafting though, and I understand the Moonkin one, and Squishy linked this one. I looked through it. There are some things that aren't great about this, particularly not knowing the difference between whether or not you're supposed to Star Surge versus Starfall, depending on talent decisions. But I mean, most of it is very basic, but honestly, it's not that bad. Like
it's gonna work for the majority of people, and I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah,
there is an issue with casters in particular using this, where you're probably gonna still move too much. Like you gotta be planted to cast. Like we gotta be casting, but like for most people, they were already having that problem regardless. It's not new. But I think that
But if this allows them to do that, they could actually gain a DPS increase.
I mean,
right?
It depends on the person. I think that for a lot of people, you'll probably be better off mashing Moonfire and Sunfire to move, or like than pressing nothing, right? The APL's APL's trying to cast Wrath, but you're like in a normal situation, you would press Moonfire or Sunfire while you're moving. In some situation, or you would press Star Surge there. But here, you're not going to be pressing anything. You're literally just going to be queued into Wrath, but it's not casting Wrath because you're walking. Yeah. I mean, there's probably some situations where it's fucked, but
for the majority of people, I think this is perfectly fine. And if they're allowed to focus more on the mechanics,
this does press cooldowns. By the way, these are cooldowns.
They're midi cooldowns.
These are. I don't know. This is a 2 minute. Like,
let me clarify that. It seems like some cooldowns are used and some aren't. Like, I don't think on the Arcane Mage one. Oh no, Touch of the Magi is in this, so just no surge. But
the only cooldown that's not press your Celestial Alignment, but the rest are.
Yeah. But like to Growl's point, I think the majority of this is perfectly fine, and the GCD change or a damage change in the future just for using it allows people to actually experience the encounters in a different way rather than so being focused on the rotation. They can maybe actually help with raid mechanics instead of standing there and watching bad stuff happen and their raid blow up around them.
Do you think it's an effective way of teaching people, Squishy? I mean, circling this back, do you think that this is an effective way of teaching people how to play the game? Should the game be more like this?
I'm gonna run in front of his answer. I think from a rotation perspective, I think absolutely not. From a mechanics and learning the boss fight, oh my god, absolutely yes.
Okay.
Like if you're sitting there and pressing one button and it's like, I can actually listen to the raid leader now. I don't care where I stand because I'm pressing my one button. Like, okay, now I'm going to actually line up where I need to get knocked back on Sprocket because instead of just, this button, like, I think this will absolutely make people focus on mechanics and do way, way better. Assuming that they're doing the one button thing. I don't know, I assume you agree, but maybe you have other thoughts.
I'm very similar. I think there's stuff to learn from a rotation here, like very, very basic stuff like what is your builder and what is your spender. Could be a very basic interpretation.
Sure.
But I do think the biggest thing here is it's going to allow people to experience a change in how they view. If we're talking specifically about raids and dungeons, they're going to be able to, probably be more aware when it comes to noticing mechanics or noticing their raid. Or, the other side outside of that content is they're going to be able to complete delves faster or stuff like that. And I think that's all probably good things.
Should the game be more like this?
I think I personally think the amount of focus that goes into an optimal rotation is absurd.
I agree 100%.
Like,
well, it's hard. Well, okay, let me backpedal a little bit, right? It's hard because it depends, right? Like, let's say you're fighting a boss and it's a patchwork boss, and it's like, actually, let me rewind a little bit. Okay, so let's say I'm doing a key, and it's been a little bit of a messy run, and we're going to the last boss, and we don't have that much time. But oh man, we're gonna pull a pack into it to give me funnel on my Arcane Mage, and we have Bloodlust right on pull, and I have all my CDs up. And if I fucking just hit every button perfectly and do Omega Giga damage, like we're gonna time this key, like that's fun as shit. And it's not really anything about WoW mechanics, but at the same time, like that's a really cool part of the game that I've never really experienced yet until I played DPS. Like I'm literally doubling the damage of everybody in my party of like actual good players just because of like they're playing around me and this is my moment, and then I mess up my surge and then we deplete the key by 7 seconds. But I think when it comes to hard raid bosses, I think that the rotations get way too hard. When it comes to really hard Mythic Plus packs where there's tons of stuff going on and where you're cycling stops and getting kicks and positioning, I think stuff's too hard. But at the same time, like, not all of WoW is you're doing that, right? Sometimes in WoW you have, for instance, the last phase of Gallywix, which you would say is very fun, right? Like I'm doing that too. It's not like super complicated. You do, it's very punishing if you don't get things right, but it's like, you're blasting damage because you're just trying to get this thing down before your raid dies. And it's like, I don't know, it's hard, right? Like it's hard with how much of a variety there are in mechanical complexity in different raid fights to say, a rotation is too easy or too hard.
I had a thought and I forgot it. Oh,
All right,
that's
well,
what it was.
All right, go ahead.
No, I got it. So I want to say how crazy it is that WoW has a fully built simulation bot to optimize rotations and gear every single patch.
Dude, this
Like-
game is impossible to fucking research, I will say. Yeah.
Like, think about how crazy that is, and think about being a developer for this game. Like, not only is all your stuff going to be vigorously checked by a tool that the community made, but they are probably, with the amount of time that they spend over this, going to beat your own personal simulations and math, which I think is crazy. But think about like when we were playing Sunderfolk, none of that really exists. We can do our best guess for what we think the best damage rotation is. And, you know, Tettles, you were playing DPS. It probably consisted of a little bit of like builder spender and a little bit of like this ability buffs this ability.
talking
So I
about
want to use
Fellowship?
these kind of as fellowship. What did I say?
Wait, Sunderfolk.
Sunderfolk.
I don't know what the fuck that
I
is.
had no
Oh,
idea what
Sunder-
you were talking.
Sunderfolk is a different thing. Fellowship. Sorry, there was a different
Yeah,
game I was talking
fellowship.
about.
Yeah.
Fellowship. Like, you know, you have different things that you know, that buff each other, so you want to use them in sequence and stuff like that. But like the exact answer isn't known at the moment that we played, and so you're just doing your best guess. And were you doing optimal damage? Probably
Uh-huh.
not.
Maybe.
But you slowly like improved there, and you're probably, you know, still having fun despite not doing optimal damage. WoW is not like that, you know. And this might be kind of taking a step back. I personally want like the more simple rotations of Fellowship, but like it would take a lot for Blizzard to step this back right now.
Are World of Warcraft rotations that complicated?
I think we made them complicated.
Right. Well, again, it just comes down to like it depends on the situation. You know, like a general do okay damage on AOE or single target isn't that hard, but like to do everything perfectly and certain
Yes.
classes like during your cooldowns, yeah, you know, you mess up one little thing and it's like I don't know.
Like if Arcane Mage, you know, Growl's talked about the barrage timing and the weak core and all that stuff. Like, if none of this was researched out, you would barrage at what you felt like was right. And maybe you try to figure out a better time in the future. If, you know, you compare yourself to another Arcane Mage who's barraging at a different time, you talk with them, you're like, oh, yours is so much better than mine. But there isn't like that optimal, figured out, here's the 23 conditions of when you should Arcane Barrage.
Oh, it's
But
true.
there
I mean,
isn't WoW.
Oh, there
So-
really is. Another thing I think is funny is I keep reading the thing that like, Blizzard sucks, or you know the rotations are gonna be bad or whatever. But it's like, no, there are like, what do you mean? Like, there's literally sim bots, like people sim characters, and this is already known how to play nearly perfectly on every single class.
They could just
Like,
scrape the sim
yeah,
APLs.
this is public APLs. Yeah, this is something that they don't even need to come up with it. They could just yoink every single one and just do exactly what it is.
That's what
and then-
Healy did.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, you know, to say that this is, and that's why I keep talking about numbers and tuning in this, is because it's totally up to Blizzard how they tune this knob of how much of a penalty it gives you, because ultimately it's going to smoke everybody. I posted this thing in the Discord. You don't even really need to show it. So I looked up a guild. This guild is, I would describe as mostly pretty serious gamers. They're 4 of 8 mythic right now. They're like a casual 2-day guild. And so this is their average DPS parse on their most recent sprocket kill. Right? So what Tettles and Squishy were saying basically is like, on heroic sprocket, if you're staying alive, it's going to give you about, let's say, a 70 parse or a 75% parse, right?
Yeah.
That beats almost everybody in this raid. Almost
Yeah.
like, and this is a 4 of 8 mythic guild. There are people in this guild with timed 14s, 15s. There are people who are professional gamers in other games in this guild, streamers, like people who are cutting edge raiders on other characters. And I'm not saying that, okay, these guys are going to be one button rotation helpers, but like, you know, if I would say a lot of people are going to get beat by one button rotation plus, and Squishy would argue that one button rotation plus staying alive plus positioning plus doing the mechanics properly.
Yep.
And if you can do all that, more power to you. And to be honest, that's the best argument and the thing that I'm most interested about how it plays out, that maybe, you know, maybe as a healer brain, I'm okay in this world where all my DPS are just pressing one button and they're just actually doing the fucking job, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe that is good. I
How
personally,
do you feel
I think
about this not working for healers or tanks.
Yeah. Do you want to know the? Do you have a healer that you want to know what shows up for?
Oh, please.
Growl, pick a healer.
wait,
Pick a healer.
like the API for the one
Yeah.
button mode?
The APL for yeah. Or and the light up one.
Oh,
What do you got?
Disc Priest, easy.
Disc Priest. All right. Discipline.
I love the squishy hat. This goes hard. That John
right.
Wowhead.
So it is in the game.
No, it is not a healing rotation. It is a damage rotation for all healers.
Oh, it's just a damage rotation.
It's just damage. So here it is. I liked it there. It is Shadow Word Pain if there's no Shadow Word Pain, Mind Blast, Penance, Smite, Shadow Word Death if the health is less than 20%, Holy Nova if there's 12 targets, Smite, and then Penance.
12.
Yep. Oh yeah, Holy Nova 12 or more targets. That's a classic. People will point that out on my stream. They're like, I noticed you're not Holy Novaing on that poll. I'm like, bro, I'm not counting out. Oh, there's 15 mobs. I'm gonna press Holy Nova for my 2% damage gain.
It's time to Holy Nova. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, should this work for healers and tanks though? Because I feel like the answer is yes.
It does work. It does work for tanks. Tanks have their own thing.
But it said no defensives on this thing.
No defensive. I mean, yeah. What are you gonna do?
Well, so it doesn't. So it won't press any of your active mitt. It's only pressing like stuff for threat, basically.
No, it won't. I mean, does I think Blood Decay presses Death Strike for obvious reasons because you have to.
Oh, the worst part is it probably presses it. It's like, oh, my runic power is capped. It's time to press Death Strike.
Yes, Death Strike is number 10 if runic power is above an 8. Can't tell. Monitor's dirty.
Every healer has that like rude awakening
This just
when they
isn't
finally get good enough to pay attention to Death Knights, and they start pugging and they see the Death Knight reach full runic power, and then immediately they just throw 2 raw natty Death Strikes at full health just to whatever do a little bit more damage, and then it's like, oh well,
Yeah, this is an offensive. This is an offensive Blood Decay because your Death Strike is way down there.
That's good.
Okay, so again, this is my point. So it doesn't work for tanks or healers. Not that it doesn't work for tanks or healers, but if you use it, you are going to be a floor POV tank, not an actual tank. And I promise nobody's getting fucking healed if you're doing that disc for rotation. Where are atonements?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't even hate... Okay, for healers, I wouldn't even hate if it was... So, like, whenever you talk about smart healing, you talk about, a hot that heals the lowest health target. I wouldn't even hate if there was, like, a one-button rotation for healers that was, like, target lowest health target, heal them. Then it's like, all right, target the next one, heal them. Like,
there are interesting ways to do it. I think... You sort of nailed it though with the idea that whatever it is, it would have to look different from a DPS rotation one, right? Like one thing I was thinking of, like maybe they have like a 3-button rotation for healers where you have like button 1 is like mana efficient heal, just to like, you're spamming it. Button 2 is like emergency heal, and then button 3 is like party heal. And it just uses your best available party heal, single target heal, and emergency, like, you know what I mean? Like something like that, I think could work, but it would have to be way different from, literal 1-button rotation.
In tanks, I would do it to where, say you're playing a prot warrior or something like that, you always have one source of mitt up, whether it be shield block, whether it be shield wall, whether it be shout, whether it be like whatever it is, right? Demo shout or whatever, but is where you always have something up. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
Yeah, like I think they could add something. I don't know if they should.
Why? There's already not enough tanks and healers. We need more, bro. We got to get more.
I mean that's true. But do you want your a 1-button tank in your plus 14 keys?
Shit, I don't want a 1-button DPS in any of my keys, but like that's not gonna stop them.
No, I just as a tank, I think doing it on like having an offensive damage rotation so you can focus more on when you depress your defensive cooldowns is actually perfectly fine. It takes the load off of like keeping threat and stuff like that, and allows the tank to actually figure out when to prioritize using their defensive cooldowns.
Right, it's almost the opposite, right? Like it's almost like as a DPS, you should have some sort of rotational complexity because that's all you're doing. But
Correct.
like, it's almost as if a tank, like if anything, a tank should be the one that you would want most. Well, like think about bear tank, for example, right? When bear tank is strong, bro, that's sweet for pugs because you literally just walk around one button thrash, one button
Orgeron
iron
has
fur.
Iron Fur and Thrash macro together.
The same button. Yeah, yeah, he already is.
He's literally a title player with one fucking button for bear.
Yeah, he is literally a one button tank. He's already invented the one button tank on some patches. And it's just like, I think that, going back to what Squishy said about the upsides of it is like, well, if you're doing all your mechanics and your job properly, then okay, good job. Like, he doesn't really value doing your rotation perfectly. And to be fair, like, I maybe don't a little bit either, right? If I'm saying they should lower the complexity of it, I'm saying this shit's way too complicated. This shit's way too important. We don't need everyone to have really complicated rotations. And I think that in the direction the game is going, maybe that is sort of the answer in that, like, okay, I complain about defensive creep being way too crazy and needing to press all the defensives at the right times, but it's like, well, if I'm not juggling an insane combo while I'm doing that, maybe it would be fine to be like every 20 seconds figure out what defensive to use and then have something ready for the shout, If I'm not like completely depleting my brain of all resources while that's going on and like having to juggle that, then maybe that, maybe that is the game, is learning how to keep yourself alive and where to stand and all that.
I think that we all three agree though that the new player experience for this game is fucking terrible.
Yeah. So let me be clear to like kind of correct my crash out, because I'm sure there's a lot of people like Keck W Growl's mad that people are gonna beat him with a rotation helper or whatever. My problem isn't that, like, I do think that it will create some social pressure and some problems with people who get beat by the rotation helper or whatever. My main concern is that I just don't think that people should feel that they should have to use it. Like, I like the idea that it's there if people want it. The problem is that I keep trying to get at is the better it is, the more people are going to feel like they should use it.
Do you want the penalty to be bigger?
Yes, basically. Yes. I think that the more people that feel like they should use it, it's gonna, like, it just makes the game less fun. When you go in, it was really fun for me in the first key to just mash one button and walk around on a Ret Paladin with no UI. But like in the third key, I was falling asleep and I'm like, I'm just gonna go do something else. Like, I had so many viewers, everyone was laughing and it was like a big meme, and I'm like, I'm so bored of this already. Because like, that's not what made me fall in love with WoW, is like walking around and pressing one button, right? Like, if you're let's say you're playing with a loved one or a family member and you don't really like WoW, but they're fucking addicted and you can't get them off the game, so you're doing it to spend time with them, and you just want to chat in Discord or chat sitting next to them and press one button and not be a total burden. Like, I think that's fine. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. But I think that, like, again, the better it is, the more you're going to feel inclined to use it when that's not what you want to do, like, I think people underestimate or underestimate what it's like to be the shitty person in the raid. Like, being the worst person in the raid or the worst 5 people in the raid sucks. Like, you don't like that feeling when you're holding your guild back. Like, dude, anytime I play with like liquid guys or whatever, like, when I was raiding in Cataclysm, and it was just like, bro, I'm just raiding with 20 other people who have already done this raid before and are, by the way, the best raiders in the entire world. And they're just like shooting the shit, doing whatever. And I'm just like, I'm like trying so hard in Cataclysm to stay alive to the stupid mechanics because I'm just bad, right? And it's like, being the shittiest person in the raid doesn't feel good already. And like, gosh, that pressure of just like, not cheating, but just like having to give up your fun, it's almost the reverse of, like, I'm sure a lot of people have felt how bad it is to feel like they have to re-roll off of their class, right? Like, they're playing a class and they really like it and they vibe with that class, but man, they're holding their group back or they're holding their guild back, and now they have to re-roll on some easy dog shit fodom because they want to fit in. I feel like it's a similar feeling where it's like you're giving up your fun for the betterment of the group, and that social pressure is going to be there to make you do that. And that's sort of the problem that I have and why I think it's not good for the game. And I think that, like, there should be I think there should be a pretty significant penalty of using it. And I also think that, like, while I don't, again, Healy's already in the game and light up buttons, blah, blah, blah is there. So I'm not saying it shouldn't. But I do think that they should really, really look at the new player experience and teaching people and be like, how do we, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure I could come up with an arcane mage training scenario that would teach you to be good enough to play in 12s, and I'm a complete idiot. Like, everyone's seen Jangbi. Like, I'm not some mage expert, right? Like, but I think I could come up with something. Like, I don't think it would be that hard or that much effort. And holy crap, would that be cool? Like, how much cooler of an announcement would that have been if they would have said, okay, now if you return to Stormwind, there's the master training grounds where every class has like a bronze, silver, and gold level, and by the time you're gold level, it like proves that you've mastered your class. It's like that would be so much cooler of an announcement than, oh, you can walk around pressing one button. Like,
That's where I fail on my druid, the fucking gold training ground.
Girl, the one counterpoint that I want to say is, like, I agree with you. People shouldn't feel pressure to do things that they don't want to do. Completely agreed. But the thing is, how many people do you think you play with already use a Hikili or a GSC and you just don't know?
Bro, that's what I was saying last week.
Yeah,
How
exactly.
crazy was it that I brought that up last? I swear I didn't know. I don't know how much. Obviously, you guys can't say what you guys know, but I swear. You know what's actually crazy? Hold on, I have to read this DM. So after literally the day after we did that, right? Someone who's been a regular viewer of mine and a viewer of the pod, he said he basically DM'd me saying something along the lines of he got a chance to participate in a private Blizzard playtest that demonstrated a feature of a built-in Hikili-like system and a single button press rotation. And so he was basically leaking this announcement to me without after I had said that on the pod, and then that day they announced it publicly.
Dude, I got DM'd by somebody, and they said apparently in China, botting your rotation is very common because of what you brought up on the podcast. They're like, yeah, botting the rotation is actually super common. Very frequently do these Chinese like RMTers or like salespeople like hit their one button to turn on their rotation bot, and then they just like
good.
They sit back and they're just like watching.
Yes, it's really good.
Netflix.
Okay, so I didn't want to correct you or whatever because like we were talking about cheats and stuff last like when I brought it up, right? And you had basically mentioned like the more popular things are like auto gathering and like bots and like profession stuff. No, what I was saying yesterday was that's what I expected too, and 90+% of the interest in the cheats and the posts were all about rotation this, rotation that, bot this, automate this. Everything is about like it is so overwhelmingly leaning towards people who just want to AFK their rotation or make it easier. And to be fair, like again, it's so tough because there is that subsection of the player base that either A is just like doing solo content and it doesn't matter, or B like has some sort of disability. And it's like there's so many people that it's so cool that it's for that I hate to be the guy who's against it and who's like barking about them putting it in the game. But at the same time, like again, I think they really need to be careful with like making every character playable with one button, because I feel like again, like that's my point of like, do you really learn? I feel like you get into the game, you realize you suck, you're playing with your friends, and you're doing your one button macro to play with them because you suck and you're learning. But like, at what point do you stop, right? Like at some point you have to rip the band-aid off and be like, all right, I'm going to go play with my friends and I'm going to troll and I'm going to be doing less damage than I could because I need to learn. And it's like, well, if at some point you have to rip the band-aid off anyway, like, I don't know, maybe again, it could be good to see all the dungeons first and learn the mechanics and then try it. I don't know.
Someone we propped a growl rant there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting. It's so, it's like Dude, so interesting of a topic.
This might be before your time, girl. Squishy, do you remember when English or Panda TV got caught rotation botting on Feta Devourer?
No.
Oh my god.
I know who that is. I don't remember that.
There was a clip of him. He like stood up and walked away from his computer, and his character is just hitting Feta Devourer, and he's playing this Windwalker monk. It's just like a core memory of mine of just him rotation botting on Feta Devourer. I was like, what the fuck is he doing? Funny.
But yeah, like back to the counterpoint, Growl. It's just, for me, it's just like this thing already exists. People are already using it. Blizzard adding their own version, I don't think changes much.
Would you increase the penalty on it, Squishy, or do you think that? Do you think that it's fine?
I personally think they should allow people to choose GCD or damage.
Okay.
It's kind of like I don't. Well, part of it is I don't actually know what the goal of the GCD is. The only thing they've stated is they want to make it a penalty. But like, if the goal is to actually slow things down for people, then it's fine. So, but it
I
already
think it makes.
kind of
I like
exists.
that idea because it makes more classes viable, right? Like the way I see it is, there's a lot of classes that you want to do a lot of things in a certain window. Whether it's like in your cooldowns or in like a touch of the magi or whatever. And it's like losing your GCD, you lose, but like Dragon Rage, for example, with
Ace.
Dev Evoker.
Yeah.
Yeah, classes that really, really benefit from haste are gonna really, really hurt with
Imagine
using
you
this GCD
PI.
thing.
Imagine you PI some guy because you think it's the best on him, and he's just using the 1-button rotation, so he's just lost your PI.
but yeah, like I don't see a problem with them for adding this. Like that's, to me, it's adding what already exists. I don't think it's gonna change the damn thing. And kind of just fits along, their long-term add-on philosophy, which we haven't talked about yet.
Yep. All right, time to talk about the add-on philosophy. So the add-on philosophy, I think that we're going to have basically zero complaints about. Blizzard basically stated that they wanted to add some of the fan favorite add-ons into the game, including damage meters, and then start to condense down all of and improve a lot of the visual clarity on a lot of abilities just in general. And it seemed like they were trying to get into a world where you don't have to have weak auras installed to be able to play the game. And they started talking about changing complexity on raid boss encounters and removing the assignment style weak auras in some capacity. And I was like, oh, thank fucking God. And because they kept stating that they wanted to reduce the computational power of weak auras just in general. Would you think that's a fair assessment of what they said? Is there anything that I missed?
I mean, the biggest thing is they want the game to be more playable out of the box. I think they acknowledge that you need, if you're doing challenging content, you need add-ons, which I think is step one.
Boss mods. They said that they're going to add base boss mods to the game as well, as eventually.
Which is funny. When we played Fellowship, we're like, "Whoa, this is sick."
Yeah. Dude, I just remember having this very visceral experience whenever I started playing, and I had this visceral feeling where I was like, dude, why do you have to download add-ons to play this game? This game is so dog shit. Like, that was like literally my first reaction to, yo, you need add-ons for this thing. I'm like, why? Why do I have to download third-party tools to play the game? Like, this game sucks. Like, and that's how I genuinely felt about it at the time. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who, whenever they start the game, somebody goes, yo, you need a boss mod, or yo, you need weak auras to be able to track your abilities. And they're just like, why? This game is bad if you can't just play it out of the box.
It's really like I'm a big fan of this change. I've been thinking for a while that raid encounters have kept getting more and more complex. Very similar to what Mythic Plus was, like last season and the season before that, where things, there were 10 casters in every pack and they're casting 3 different things that you all need to interrupt or stop. And it's just like, what do? They reduce that complexity in Mythic Plus, and guess what? People have more fun. That's crazy. And it's just like, I know, like for me as well, it's just like, well, Mythic Raid needs to take the same action, right? Like we need to reduce the complexity, but Blizzard acknowledges that due to the existence of weak auras, anytime they reduce the complexity, the weak auras are just going to continue doing exactly what they've been doing and making, removing any kind of mechanic that they put in there. And therefore they have to add another mechanic, which is then going to be solved by weak auras. So they have to add in another mechanic. And it's just like this ever-loving, this ever-growing cycle, which just needs to stop.
They also kind of apologized for Private Auras, more or less.
A little bit.
And they didn't necessarily apologize for it, but they did admit that it was, like, applied poorly, then the workarounds were worse than if they weren't Private Aura'd, and they were like, yeah, we kind of understand why this was bad.
Yeah. But
I'm surprised I didn't see it coming with Private Auras. I mean, that one was kind of obvious.
You see it once.
Situation.
Maybe they need to see it once. They saw the workaround, they're like, we're not doing this again, and I'm okay with that, because they've kind of rolled back on Private Auras a little. And that's fine, personally.
Dude, the original iteration of Brute Twister Ovanax, the egg circles were Private Aura'd, and I remember they hotfixed out the Private Aura halfway through the testing on Mythic because they were like, "Oh, this fight's not doable." Oh, that would. Yeah. I can't imagine like you trying to YOLO that mechanic, but I think that's something that they said whenever they were talking about how they would design fights differently in the new era where weak auras seem to be a little bit less powerful. They were like, yeah, we can just like do a lot of different stuff, like slowing down the game, just giving you a little bit more time to where you can, make sure that 2 people are on top of the Brood Twister Ovanax egg, or 1 person's in the Jailer Circle. If we just like slow that down, and instead of you have to do it in 8 seconds, you have 15 seconds to do it. It's way more reasonable.
Gallywix is the perfect example of that. Girl, have you got to phase 2 or phase 3 yet?
We have, yeah.
You know how long those fucking circles take to explode, man?
The TikTok
It
bombs?
feels real good, doesn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, well, that's
like-
the funny thing is I remember like trying to look at because like normally I would expect to have like very scripted movement in a part like that, like phase 2 or 3 of the last boss, but it is kind of like you just look at it and you just figure out where to go. You're like, okay, there's a beam
Exactly.
here and there's circles here. Like, I'm not really like, okay, I need to move to this quadrant and then at 6:04 I need to move to here and then I need to go left here. Like it's just kind of like you just look at your screen
Yeah.
and you play the game.
I have a circle. There are people around me. Oh, I need to make room for this guy. Oh, we did it! Yay! Like
Mhm.
it feels good. One of the like someone I know kind of said, there are 3 like using D&D stats. There's 3 different aspects of how to make a raid encounter challenging. Right? You have the gear or strength. You have the execution, which is the dex, and you have the planning and thinking aspect of problem solving, which is the int. And weak auras took the int equation completely out of the picture, which meant developers could really only test you on gear and execution, which is why
Yeah.
everything was so fucking execution based recently, which I hated.
I will
So-
say, I always hated the people who came into like streams or whatever and be like, weak auras are playing the game for you. Whenever it wasn't like that at all, the fight was literally undoable without weak auras a lot of the time. And you're just like, yeah, man, I don't want to be using this weak aura, but otherwise, these other 19 schmoes I'm raiding with are going to collide with one another because they can't figure out where to go on time. And it's like, maybe you could YOLO it, but it's not even YOLOable. Like, it's not that weak auras are playing the game. The game is unplayable without them at this level.
Yeah,
I mean
and
that's where I think a lot of the like classic versus retail, or like we made it this far without saying his name. He who starts with the letter A, where his opinions sort of fall apart is like, well, we don't really want to use the weak auras either, right? But at the same time, like we want to go into the raid with our friends and we want to get the best gear, like I would love to, like it would be kind of interesting.
Do you want to
actually
use weak auras or do you want to
blind
spend
prog in
800
WoW.
pulls? Like, do you?
Right, yeah, like
Yeah.
it's just unrealistic in the the fights are designed with the weak auras in mind, so we feel obligated to use them. Like I don't think that we're sitting here being like, oh, look at how smart we are, we're so cool, we're weak auras. Like, I think most top players hate the level of add-ons and complexity that are involved in it too, and it's just like you just feel like you have to use it in order to compete or in order to play the game or get the items that you want to get or stay in the guild that you want to be in or whatever.
Yeah, and honestly, I think there are a decent chunk of people who would appreciate if there was more problem solving and less execution. Because when you're waiting for people to execute clearly, you've learned everything you can. It can get real boring and real frustrating real quick.
I have a question for you. Do you think problem solving's dead with how the Race World First is?
No.
Okay, explain. How would you make a fight that works well with problem solving that you couldn't just copy a strat from a Race World First guild and get all the
It's not
problems out of it?
It's not necessarily about copying a strat. It's about you figuring out why the strat works that way or what you are going to do in that situation. Like, you could learn a lot of this from like logs or stuff like that, but you go into a fight like, let's say, Soaken Court, and the boss teleports a random direction. You need to know what to do if the boss moves that direction. Or actually, better example, Sprocket. You actually need to know 2 sets of movements. The fight is completely scripted, but you need to know a red movement and a blue movement for every single move on that fight. And there is, like, you could know the entire strategy, but each set of drills is going to be different. Each need to be in a different strategy. There's also the problem solving of what do I do when I need to go get a far drill or far mine and then drills are coming. That's something you need to learn. Like, there's a lot of problem solving that comes in raid encounters that aren't just let's take the basic strategy.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
There's a lot of nuance there.
I remember Fallen Avatar was like that for me a lot, where you had the base strat of how you were doing the fight, and it was like, it wasn't even like that difficult, but then the tricky part is like understanding when you needed to get out of the beam soak and making sure that people were like understanding where they were supposed to be movement wise to make sure they were at the right angle to not let the beam contact the boss.
I'm pretty sure players with weak auras these days would smoke Fallen Avatar.
We had weak aura for Fallen Avatar. We were still
Yeah, but that was before the time of like air horn and like the entire raid is synced with liquid raid tools, and everybody's on the same wavelength, and it's yelling at you to move into the beam and all that kind of stuff.
We did just have a big list with your group's names on it. Everybody had the same, like the not the same.
There was
list.
no "you're next" in 5 seconds.
There was
and
definitely not that. There was a list, and it was like, wow. And then I watched other guilds do that fight without a list, and I was like, I don't know how the fuck they did that without a weak aura.
Yeah. So, I think this is a great change. I look forward to. I know some people are like, "Oh my god, what I'm going to do without weak auras?" But like, I think it's a good vision. They're going to have to put in the work, but I think this will be good for the health of the game.
They said everything cosmetic is still also going to stay. So there's no cosmetic add-ons. It sounded like they were just going to like restrict API calls on computational functionality. That sounded to me, just by listening to the interview, like what they were aimed at like solving is that these assignment weak auras seem like they're trying to go away.
They probably just delay the log. Like, you remember they're like the Warcraft logs had that like
the overlay.
The overlay, that's what it was. Yeah, the overlay. And then for a while they delayed the combat log uploading. They'll probably do something.
I forgot about that.
They'll probably do something like that to the in-game combat log, so API calls are just delayed. That's probably the easiest solution for them once they eventually get there.
How does that work with boss mod? I guess if they want you to use their boss
mod. You can't use. There's a reason they're going to be making their own boss mods, which is to use their boss mods.
Oh shit! Maybe boss mods are going to be gone.
I mean, they'll probably still work.
I mean, that's good though, right? Like in my opinion, that's good.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's.
I think a lot of people look at some things or some features of their favorite add-ons and either worry that they're going to be gone when they're not, or think about, how am I going to do Mythic Jailer without this assignment thing? And it's like, well, there's not going to be Mythic Jailer, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why I think it's a good thing, is because, I think the problem is like when I've been thinking about this a lot lately to put it into a bunch of different ways of thinking about the game, but WoW, like ultimately when you make a game, what you're doing is you're making challenges for players, right? You're constantly like making challenges for players, and then it's the player's job to overcome those challenges. And really, any game is literally just a series of challenges or tasks or whatever. Like that's all it is. Like all the developer is doing is throwing things in your way constantly and trying to do it in a way that's like fun or interesting. And it like breaks down in WoW when players can build the tools that they need to beat the challenges. Like generally what makes the game reasonable is the fact that the developers also give you the tools that you need. They give you the tools, you have the tools that the developers create for you, and you have the challenges that they created, and then you have to figure out what do I put in what area, right? Whereas when the players can make the tools, it's like, imagine if you could just I'm going to build a jetpack and make my character fly really high in the sky and the guy won't hit me. It's like, that's fucking stupid. But I mean, in theory, that's kind of what weak auras are doing, is they're allowing us to create our own tools and solutions for dealing with the problems that Blizzard is creating. And it's like, well, it's hard for them to make fun or reasonable challenges when all of a sudden, you can just make a computer that solves the thing for you or whatever. And it's like, I don't know, I think Blizzard should have, the idea of add-ons is really cool, and it also patches a problem in that if there's shitty things with the Blizzard UI, you can just replace them. But I do feel like when it comes to specific difficult encounter design, it really, really falls apart with the idea that you can just create your own tool or UI or way to handle the mechanics.
Them talking about mob telegraphing in Mythic Plus also resonated pretty hard. I do hope they end up fixing that. Now, I'm really hesitant on that because they shouted out like a mob that they thought was good in Arakara with the casters, and I actually don't disagree that I think the Arakara mob, like the casters, are bad in the sense of you can kind of tell they're casting Venom Bolt Volley. But the problem is whenever you have 10 mobs on top of one another, there's just no way to have good visual clarity on almost anything.
Yes,
and that to me, then them start removing things like nameplate cooldowns while they don't want that. I think it's ridiculous that you need them, but at the same point, if they remove them and then they don't remove the reason that you needed them, did they really fix anything? No.
I think M+ being infinitely scaling is really, really problematic with design for two reasons. One is what you mentioned, right? Let's say that everything is perfectly telegraphed and you can see everything easily and dodge it. It's like, well, I'm just gonna pull bigger, then fuck you, like, all right, now I'm gonna pull 10 frontal guys instead of 4. I'm gonna keep pulling until it's barely within reason that we can do this pull, and then there it is, And then number 2, I think that, like, one thing they constantly say is like, okay, there's 3 mobs. One of them is a dangerous caster mob that you're supposed to stop. And then 2 of them are like, well, it's okay if casts go off, right? But the problem is that doesn't always apply depending on what key level you're doing, right? If you're doing a 10
Yes.
and there's 2 mobs that are using bolt and then 1 mob that does like an unavoidable slam, it's like, well, who cares? You just let the bolts go off, you kick the important one, and then the slam happens. But in a high key, it's like, well, 1 bolt plus 1 slam kills you through a wall. And it's just like, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like, we have to stop every single bolt all of a sudden. And that's where I think that breaks down is like, they create this mob with the intention that it's allowed to shoot and get damage off it. It's supposed to be like, kind of pestering you. But the higher you go, eventually that mob all of a sudden becomes a mandatory cast. And it's like, well, but that's not really how the mob was designed, right? Like the mob wasn't designed to be, you need to stop every single web bolt that's going off.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done better with that this season. I don't think there's as many just random free casters that destroy you other than like Thunderers and Rookery. And they
have done a lot better, I think. There are obviously some problem points. I think some of the really nasty ones were like Grim Batol, the like fire circle area where second boss was. There's way too many casters there.
God
the
damn.
Rookery area. There were some problems, but I think that overall they've done a good job in pushing the complexity of Mythic Plus down.
That dungeon that nobody did, City of Threads.
Oh yeah, that had a lot of casters.
That dungeon that nobody remembers. Yeah,
Priority's tough. No, but I mean, Priority's got a lot of casters in it.
It does. I don't think they hit as hard though, unless I'm mistaken.
I think that like in general, like you could just give casters like a blanket 5-second cooldown on X cast bolt. That way, if you hit them with like a 0-second CC, like a Fear or an Incap or something like that, they don't immediately start recasting. And that would effectively, you put them on like a long lockout, but it's not like they're not gonna cast again or something like that. Like hitting him with a mage kick at that point, which is mage lockout's fucking sick. Like,
but also I don't think these changes would be targeted at you. You're gonna know what's gonna be deadly to you anyways. Yeah. Like the visuals are gonna be for players who are first to the dungeon. Like, oh my god, that's a big scary cast. Considering it's impossible to tell interrupts from each other. But one of the things that they also said was they want to flag, like actually on the nameplate, I believe, a high value interrupt. I believe that's what was said.
They did say that.
Which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like maybe the cast bar is different color or stuff like that. But one more thing that we didn't cover, they did mention better default nameplates, which is needed by far.
Yeah, the nameplates in this game are fucking terrible. I think that the issue for me, the thing that I'm worried about the most is like not having the ability, like if boss mods are like completely gone, not having the ability to put sound cues on things would kind of be unfortunate. And nameplate cooldowns for they just put a bunch of fucking invisible casts on mobs. I don't even know why. And it's just like I wish I could tell that they were about to cast this ability, but for some reason the mob is literally just now blasting me with whatever ability. Like Chainmail in Prior of the Sacred Flame does this well, where you see her like, you see her cast go off and then she leaps at you and you're like, cool, I don't really need this. But then
you mean like it doesn't show you the target of the cast?
Yeah, but then there's but okay, first off, it doesn't show me the target that's casting on, but like that, I think that's almost like a done well ability where you kind of know that the ability's happening. There's so many like Juggernauts and Ataldazar where it's just like, yeah, the fucking ability is up and it's immediately casting on me. I'm like, oh my, bro, I'm sorry, my bad.
Yeah, like charges are a good example, like cats or dogs or whatever in a lot of dungeons.
Yeah, exactly. Cats in any dungeon in particular, you're just like, well, it's just leaping.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised with the feedback. Like, this is clearly going to take a long time. They've already talked about sound cues, people missing that, with the cooldown manager. I wouldn't be surprised if, they can allow you with their built-in boss mods to apply sounds there.
I'm down. Like, that's good.
And then, like, if you give the feedback, like, we want, Mythic Plus. I mean, it's a pretty common thing at this point, at the very least, even in 10s. Like, the majority of people I know, the casuals, the friends that I know that don't Mythic Raid, that just do Mythic Plus, they have, Terathal's pack or Kazi's pack for dungeons where it has the cooldown on things. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe made a version of that, or added it to whatever feature they want.
Yeah.
Because it's technically part of Bigwig's DBM.
All right. that's going to be it of this bonus episode. Growl's got to get to raid in a little bit. He's got to down Mythic Gallywix. We're going to be back on Tuesday. We're going to have a guest, Farfa, talking about the new player experience. And we are going to be discussing the Dinar walk back. And apparently there's class tuning as well. We're going to talk about all that on Tuesday. So congratulations on this bonus episode. Shout out to Patreon. Shout out Wowhead. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, can you read the Patreon list real quick? You forgot.